All right.
There we go.
Hello and welcome. I am Linda Barris. I am with the Mystical Woo Academy, and I am with Trina Rose of Laughing Goddess 888. And we are here for another class with the Academy. And I'm going to assign the time over to Trina to tell us about herself and what the class is about tonight.
Hi. I'm, as she said, Trina, and I like to start with my story, but I'll give the shorter version. Many of you have already heard it, so rather than repeat everything, 2.5 years ago, I was literally dying of multiple autoimmunes, MS being the worst of them. And I had a lot of things happen, synchronicities that turned me towards life. One of the biggest, ironically for many people, was COVID. I was on immunosuppressant medication for my autoimmunes because it's literally your body attacking itself. So that's how they treat it. And my doctor said, don't go out, don't catch it, because if you do, you are likely to be one of the people that end up at least hospitalized. And that gave me perspective for the first time in 8 to 10 years to realize I didn't want to die. Because I was really a shell of who I am now and who I realized was under there. Because I was living on autopilot. I was in a very unhappy relationship, a very angry relationship. And I had made myself a barrier between my angry now ex and my children. I was very codependent in it, which is something I've worked through a lot, which is why I teach a class on codependence, teach what you need to learn, always working through it. But especially with my children, because I didn't want them to be unhappy at all, because they had enough unhappiness in an angry household. But in the process of doing that, I was not giving any self-care to myself. I was giving no credit to myself. I was very much less than what I knew at a very deep level I could be. But that turns into a lot of self-flagellation of well, why am I not? Why can't I stand up for myself? Why don't I have boundaries? And all of these things were then me attacking myself through the self-flagellation, causing my own autoimmunes. So when I ended up with a partner, I shouldn't say ended up with, I feel I manifested him when I decided I wanted to live. He had had a similar story of, giving up on his life and pretty much living on autopilot, convincing himself he was happy, but wasn't really living, and kind of had that self-beating himself up too, knowing that there should be more. There's more to it than this. We met online and I had a deep spiritual, very intellectual conversation for the first time in probably at least a decade. And I had been very spiritual at some parts. I was raised by a pagan father. I had a Wiccan circle, and it dances on parts of spirituality that I understood. But then when I lost that, it's hard to want to believe in God when your life is crap and you want to say, well, God wouldn't punish. Well, then you have trouble believing in God if your life feels like a punishment. So working through all of that, ending up with a partner that we both said we're turning towards life, like we're finally want to live longer and not let all of these illnesses destroy us. So we turned by eating, our first turning towards life was eating a whole food plant-based diet, which did help with a lot of the medical stuff, a lot less inflammation. But I still had the MS. I still had trigeminal neuralgia, which is shooting pains in the face. Not as bad because with less inflammation, which the diet itself helped with. But you can't cure traditionally MS. And so I still had some of the symptoms and everything, was still on a lot of the medications. When I started, I was on 28 different medications. At the point in which I started channeling, which was when everything changed and what I call awakening, I was down to 12 because like the diabetes medications and things I went off of because I no longer had those problems eating a very healthy diet. Now what we're addressing tonight is safe space, how to hold safe space for someone and how to be the hollow bone. Now, for me, this is a very personal topic because my curse for most of my life was that strangers would come up to me and tell me their deepest, darkest, their guilts, their fears, things they had done that, they needed to unburden themselves. And this was like at 9 years old, this started. And I prayed for resting bitch face. I did super goth. I was like, whatever will scare people away. It didn't work. When I started channeling, which was December 19th of 21, I have to do the math real quick. I started to get messages. And when I first channeled, it was spontaneous. And I actually felt like I woke up from a 3-hour nap and my partner had just had a 3-hour conversation with a dimensional being. They were teaching then me how to energy heal, which was the permission slip we needed for some of the healing initially. But then how to work on the emotional body healing, which is why I do shadow work. I address boundaries and they're all part of that healing process. And 2 days after I started channeling, I got my MRI results back and my MS was cured. I don't have lesions in my brain anymore. And that's supposedly not possible, but it's beautiful that realizing that was my affirmation, that doing this healing work on your internal self, on your fears, your traumas, why do you do the things you do, really produces healing, physical, tangible healing. And the reason that this ties into safe space is that is how you help other people heal. It's all rooted in judgment. People are always, because we have our own judgments. Let me map this out. We take something we don't feel good about ourselves for. And then there are no degrees of stuff. If we're 10 pounds overweight and we feel like a fat slob because we're 10 pounds overweight, we then cast judgment on someone that's 100 pounds overweight to say, well, at least we're not that big. And that is us not hating on the other person, not if we were true to ourselves. It's us hating on ourselves for what we don't feel good about. And so in order to work through those things and let them go, you need to be able to have a conversation with someone that doesn't make you feel judged, where you can be honest about how you feel about those things and work through them, because talking with someone else is very important in the process. Because when you're thinking to something yourself, you get a nebulous concept. You know that's true, but you don't know why you know it's true. And it's not until you talk through it that you can really see how it relates to you. Very often while I'm talking through something, I'll go, wow, that was really obvious once I said it. Or you say it and you go, I can't believe how stupid that sounded. And here I was carrying this belief that once I got it into words, made no sense. Now, if you don't have someone you can work with in safe space, journaling is probably the next closest to that, because it helps you unpack the feelings and the words and everything. But being able to hold safe space for someone else is a vital tool for the empath, because we all want to be healers. I haven't met an empath yet that hasn't started to heal themselves and gone, I want everyone to have this. And so being able to provide a judgment-free safe space is very important. The hollow bone concept is how you get there. It's a Native American concept, and it's that when you're pouring through the messages, the energy from source, you don't want your own crap in there making whatever comes through dirty. And so the example of that is if you have someone who has their own religious trauma and they're talking to someone who the church is their biggest support and is helping them feel like a sense of community, all paths are valid, but your own trauma would make you more likely to argue and put your own lens. Even if you're not saying it, you're still projecting out that energy, maybe a look on your face, whatever, every time they mention their church community. And so by becoming a hollow bone as much as you can, which is done through the shadow work and everything of your own, the better you're able to hold space for other people. Now, an important part of that is to hold space for yourself. And this is one I struggled with. What helps you get out of that defensive judgment mode to look at yourself? Now, one of my tricks that I use when it's holding safe space for myself is to think of myself as if I was someone else. Think of my situation if I was someone coming to me that was having this problem. Whatever gets me out of the fight or flight, for me, sound bowls and frequency music is very, very helpful for that calming and centering. You can use that when you're working with other people as well, to find something that makes it seem special and unique. So, because the rest of the world, they're afraid to be themselves. We all are. Because when we are honestly open and ourself to the world, we become vulnerable, which is why I do a class on vulnerability and how it's your armor. Because once you can sit that down, it's so much easier. But for most of our life, we're afraid of everyone else's judgments. And the only reason we think everybody else has judgments is because we have judgments and we're judging ourselves. But one of my favorite quotes regarding the judgment piece is Eleanor Roosevelt said, you wouldn't worry about what other people think of you if you realized how rarely they do. People don't usually walk around judging any more than seeing the parts of themselves they don't like mirrored back. And so when you can start to learn to let that go, you're able to hold space better for someone else, but making them feel like what they're going to say. And that's why I asked about the recordings and stuff with people, that what they're going to say is not going to be repeated and told to everybody, that they're not going to incur the wrath of your judgment because they're not advanced enough or spiritual enough, or whatever they worry will be your judgment. And what they're worrying will be your judgment is, again, from them. But it doesn't mean you still don't do your best to address so that they feel comfortable to just open up. And that's when the real healing is, when you talk about your shames and your guilt, because those are the roots of so much of what we do. They die when you speak about them openly, because once you can talk about something that you were ashamed of, you get less and less ashamed of it every time you speak your truth. And eventually you're able to talk about anything without worrying about it. So the process of reaching the point that you can help other people is the same as it all has been: working on your own shadows, learning about projection and perspective, where you project things more onto other people, but also making a commitment to yourself to just listen, actively listen. It's hard because we all want to fix things. The divine masculine and divine feminine tend to pop that differently, the need to fix things. For male, it tends to be much more active fixing. I want to make it better. You're crying. Who do I kill because you're crying? Tell me how to fix this. For women, it tends to be much more emotional. How do I make everyone happy? How do I keep harmony? But those aren't what we need. We don't need to fix anything when you're holding safe space. You just need to show them that someone is willing to listen. It's where traditional psychology excels, because it provides a safe space where nothing leaves this room. You can talk openly, and the person is paid to actively listen to you. Now, I'm not saying that every counselor, follows that, but it is the same method that we use when holding safe space is, feel safe. You can share anything. You're not being judged on anything. And I mean anything. There are some things that I know because of my own traumas. A great example, my father molested me in 4th grade. Were I to be dealing with someone who had pedophilia tendencies and was struggling with them, that would be, as I addressed the other time, the big spider. That would be a big spider for me. And I would still, through this work, do my best to not judge, to understand that they're here for help and they're open to wanting to let that out and express it. But we all have different levels of difficulty depending on our own lens and our own trauma. So the key for holding safe space is to do your best not to let that interfere with providing an opportunity for someone to unburden themselves. Because as I said, once they share it, healing happens sometimes very quickly, because people have been working through this subconsciously or even consciously, where they've said, I really don't want to be this way anymore. And once they can talk through it and let it out, sometimes the paradigm shifts are so quick. And you'll think there's no way this person has it. There's judgment, right? When I only talked about it 3 minutes ago. But it's because they already did all the pre-work. They just really needed that one thing that cinched it for them. And that's also when you also tend to see the really beautiful shadow tears. When someone's releasing from shadow work, the crying can be such a beautiful purge. It's how they got something that has been weighing them down. Sometimes for decades. I've had things that have come up for me and done that happened when I was little. I mean, like little. I had no idea I had traumas, associated with having to smell nice, because I grew up in a hoarder's house. Cat pee was an issue. I had issues with being the stinky kid. I had totally forgot that until it came up in some of my more recent shadow work, just in like the past month. It's amazing the crap we dig up. And safe space allows other people to do that with you, which is one of the most rewarding parts of being an empath, is to be able to use it to help heal people, not just assault our own senses when you don't know what's going on and how to deal with it. Here's a place where people are asking, I want to sit with you. I need to work through some stuff. And that is very, very rewarding all on its own. The judgment piece is where we all have to work on it. I am no exception. I have a lot of things in the world that still, as much as I know it's all part of what needs to be done, the bad things are there to provide contrast, to be a villain, because we need our villains or we don't rise to the occasion and find our strengths. They're all playing their roles, but it doesn't mean that there aren't things, bigger spiders, that you stop and just go, I'm not sure I'm ready to deal with that. And when you're holding safe space, you have to accept that that can happen, but it is also boundaries completely okay to refer someone to someone else if it's a particular, this is something, let me give you your money back. And I have other people, but this is a personal, be honest with people. It's a personal trauma for me too. And I want to make sure that you get the best answers and not ones that are tainted by my own things. So, you can handle it like anything, be honest. It's amazing how receptive people are when you are just honest, instead of trying to fake it and then accidentally hurting somebody, which is the last thing any of us want to do. I actually have seen there's a few things out there that people are addressing more in the light worker community, that people are not trauma trained. And so there are some people who end up accidentally causing more damage because they don't know how to leave the space yet for someone else. And by projecting their own issues into it, makes it very tough for a lot of people that then are left with all their traumas brought up and no way to work through it yet. And I don't blame the light workers that are doing that. They're doing the best they can with the knowledge they have, but it's a pitfall to keep an eye out for, because we know that that's the last thing any of us want to do, is try to heal somebody and end up hurting them. And that was the bulk of the safe space stuff. But I will say, the judgment piece, for me, I just had a conversation today about how there are no degrees. So we will see something that is horrible, aberrant, nobody should ever do that, but we wouldn't rail against it if it wasn't reflecting a little piece of ourselves that knows, well, we could do it a little in the right circumstance. We do something similar enough that triggers us seeing someone doing it much more grandiosely. Is that a word? Grandiosely? I don't know. But the biggest thing that I have realized is we are projecting always so that we can learn from what is reflected back to us. It is a word now. Yes. Thank you. And so we judge what we don't like about ourselves in other people. And we do it all the time. And then we assume that everyone is judging us back. And if they are judging us back, they are only judging us back because of their own reflections they don't like. It's never personal. It never has anything to do with us or our own, perceived shortcomings. It has to do with something inside them that they are not happy with. And I mean, I have the same mechanism, and I know I do the same thing. I rail against certain things I see, and then I catch, especially with social media, and I'll catch myself now because I'm actively working at calling myself out on it to clear it and go, I can't judge them for being ignorant when that's, their whole communities, their media, their everything else is telling them that that is the highest and that is the best. And then I realize I've done the same things. I listen to my community, my media, rather than always going, where do I truly feel on this topic? I'm just as influenced by the community around me. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to not consider that. Of course I do. But where do I actually feel about it instead of just repeating my sides, media sound bites? But it's something that, because I realized I do it and don't like really that I do it at a deep level, because I want to know how I truly feel about things. What am I really passionate about? Not what the media is telling me I should be outraged about today. So when I see someone on the, and again, quotes, other side, doing the same thing, I was judging that harshly. Look at that. They're not even thinking for themselves. And so you begin to see these things in your life and go, I don't want to be judgy anymore. And I definitely don't want to keep judging myself. That's how I've been hurting myself for the past 30 years. And you want to let that go. And being able to do that allows you to heal. And the more you heal, the clearer of a lens you are, the more hollow of a bone you are, and the better you're able to help other people. And I think we're actually at our 9:30, so I'm good to hand it over for questions. Anybody? Quiet group.
Quiet tonight.
It
Does anybody
happens.
have a time in their life that they think that any of this resonates? Like, was there a time that you had an aha that, like, that was me, or like I can relate to that particular part of what Trina was sharing? I know that for me, still trying to figure out where I sit and where I can hold my boundaries and protect myself in the work that I do. And I've isolated myself some, and I use the word isolated kind of loosely, but I've become quite a hermit because I don't go out, especially like to the grocery store, or so, like, I'm encouraging, like, I'm pushing myself. It's one of my goals to go out and do, because I get out there and everybody wants to open up and share with me. And sometimes it takes me back. I'm not as protected as I know that I could be and can be to have those boundaries. And it really throws me off. Especially, like, some of you know that I was in that auto accident in December of last year, and I have a brain injury. And since then, it really has been, it's been harder for me, even though this is something, keeping those boundaries and protecting myself that way, I've done for years. But since that, it's been harder. And I let a lot of that, even through Zoom calls or whatever, come through, and it really rocks my boat for a little bit when I get all those emotions and things that people are bringing up. So that's kind of my experience.
And I was going to say, a lot of that will go away as you go through the healing from your own stuff, including the auto accident. It makes sense that anything that makes you feel less secure and less safe, less invulnerable, really sends us for a loop. Because here we are plodding along, yet whatever percent of autopilot and intentional living we have mashed together. And suddenly something says, oh, I'm about to make this more difficult. you tend to see then the universe as an attacker. Or if you're really in a place of wounding, that you're being punished, that you did something, is also very often to big things like that. And it can cause you to lose faith for a bit in your own healing, because suddenly we got COVID at one point during our travels, and it threw me for a loop for a while, because I was like, I should be invulnerable. I have healed MS. How the hell am I getting sick? And it caused me a similar setback, which, I was still in my development where I was, but I had to relook at a lot of things and heal a lot of things and accept that that was necessary for the universe to do that at that time, for things that came up that then I had to work through, and shadows about all sorts of different, I was a sickly kid for years, and realizing that it's always for the best, and being able to again move the universe from someone that was or something that was punishing me to benevolence and a teacher took me probably a month or two to reacquire. And during that time, I was much more sensitive to the empathic stuff around me, because it pushed me back into more of an unhealed empath state during that. But I'm glad to say I'm through it, and it is only a temporary thing, but I'm not surprised that you're finding it harder after something that throws you for a loop like that. Did we have another question?
Yeah, Stacia, did you want to mention something?
I was just gonna say, do you see that when you guys are struggling with that, when you have a lot of trauma, do you see a lot of people get like super angry about everything because everything's like happening all at once?
Well, yes, I want to address multiple things actually that I realized in what you were saying. One, karma is never a punishment. I know that we frame it that way in our pop culture, but it is just a rebalancing back to the center balanced state. It is a correction, and it's never stronger than it needs to be, which means if a lot of things are suddenly happening, you are way out of balance in that, or because you are out of balance in it. But the other part of it that is actually quite beautiful is it's clearing away the things that are no longer serving you. It seems like, oh no, this is being, pulled away from me. And the harder you grab onto it, the more painful it is when it's yanked away. But if the universe is pulling whatever out of your life, even things that you think, oh no, like, jobs or relationships, even ones with family, it means they need to be out of your life right now. And it is causing that to happen in the gentlest way it can. The universe doesn't waste energy. It's not going to use more energy than you need to move. But whatever you need to move, trust it will keep getting stronger until you listen and let go. It's the chiropractor example I used at one of my other classes. My neck's a little sore, I should probably see the chiropractor. Well, if you're supposed to see the chiropractor and you keep going, either you tell yourself, I don't want to waste the money, it's not really that bad, I'm fine, which we tell ourselves, I'm fine, because that would be better suited for someone else. You'll end up in a car accident or something that forces you to go. Whatever it is that is for our best, you will get forced into it. Which is why we like to use what we call the 2 resistances. If we go to do something and there's a resistance, the website shuts down, or, something goes wrong and we can't do whatever that action is we were trying to do, we kind of poke again gently just to make sure. Now, if it goes right through, my belief is that there were 2 paths for the universe. We could take either, and they were both. So it was kind of saying, are you sure that's the one you want? Because this one's also viable. But if we push a second time and we run into resistance again, we drop it, because at that point, the universe is going to keep getting louder. And as you've pointed out, everything seems like it's going wrong. You don't want the universe to have to get loud with you. doesn't need to if you're listening. But if you're not listening and you're not listening to the resistances and letting go when it tells you, you'll end up with some, rope burn on your hands from holding on to it. And so it is always a good thing for things to clear out, even if it feels uncomfortable in a while. I'm trying to read Stacia's thing. Hold on. The little voices are always, at least for me, worth looking at. It doesn't mean your lens doesn't color it. It doesn't mean that you're not going to talk yourself out of some things that your intuition told you should know better. But what I have learned is that even if it's tainted by your lens, there is a root kernel of truth there. And it's always worth at least looking at, because our intuition knows. Again, we can mess up the messages because of our own fear. One of the biggest things I see when people are awakening and channeling and bringing in messages from source is if they have a very strong fear paradigm. Suddenly we're being farmed by the aliens and there's a ton of conspiracy theories and everything else, versus realizing that it is always love and benevolence. But your fear lens can really change how that comes out. And it sounds like your intuition knew, but it also looks like when you ignored it, it made you go look at it. It gave you a reason to find out and be okay. So I'm glad to hear that, it didn't have to get any louder than that. Anybody else? Might be a shorter class today. Oh, hi, Willow. I saw you pop up.
I was going to be quiet today, but apparently not.
It's okay.
Yeah, so sorry.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, so I still live with my parents, and me and my parents kind of have this very harsh love-hate relationship. And I have the temperament of my father, so I'm just very mellow, very laid back. And for the longest time, I let people invade my boundaries.
Right.
So now I'm standing my ground, and especially with them. And for some reason today I went upstairs and me and my mom had an open conversation about what I believe in, why I believe in it. And people tell me my religion is a cult, and I was like, well, it is, but it's all
Right.
up to you. But
Yes.
I'm like, look into what they do. But it was like I was able to have, because I've been practicing boundaries with her. I was able to
Right.
have that dialogue with her that was like calm and collected, and not feeling like she was attacking me because of my beliefs. She listened to me.
That's
And
wonderful.
I mean, I still got but I believe this, and this, but I wasn't like feeling like, ugh, like you're
Right.
not
You
listening to
weren't
me.
receiving judgment from it, which also means you are better with that, because any judgment that was coming from her was caused by you at a deeper level. Not that you were consciously attacking yourself through her, but when you
Yes.
expect that from other people, it's what you get.
Yeah.
People will give back. If you're looking at someone with mistrust, they can read the mistrust, and then
Right.
they're not going to be open, which then makes them dishonest, which then verifies your belief that they were not trustworthy. But it's all something we cause ourselves by putting it on them.
Right. That is very true. But yeah, it was just a weird conversation today. And that
Sounds like a very
rarely.
positive one, though.
Oh yeah, it was a positive
great.
conversation, but it was just like, I, for once in my life, told my mom, I don't believe what you believe in. I believe that me and you have been reincarnated a few hundred times together to work it out. And her leg's swollen, and I'm like, you're pushing shit down. Stop pushing shit
Yeah.
down. It's stuck in that leg. You're the one that can get it out. She goes, it's medically wrong. And I said, no, it's mentally wrong.
It's both. It's
Yeah,
medically
I know it
wrong
is.
because of the mental is the root. But like with all the healing that has happened with me, I mean, I'm completely off of all my medications and have been for over a year, but I would never tell someone else to go off their medications.
Right.
Because as long as they still need, and in your mother's case, the medical paradigm, that is the permission slips that she may be able to heal herself through as the other strengths might build, and then she can heal the underlying, which then it just poofs. But you have to work there. You can't just jump to being a college student. You kind of have to go through the first 12 grades first.
Right. But that's the thing, is my mom doesn't
Yeah.
believe it. She's still over here and I'm up here. And
But you were deciding that.
I was.
Hold on. If you don't put her past on her, and every time you talk, allow her to be where she is now without judgment, she will get there actually so much quicker than if we put the past on. And this is something I work on myself, because there are many people in my life, I still put their past on them. But I am consciously working towards it, because they can't surprise you if you're putting their past on them. Because every day we wake up, we're a more evolved person. So's everybody
Right.
else.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that I was always putting my past on myself.
Yeah, me
You know,
too.
my failures was my failure. I fell. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, obviously I didn't learn and I get that now. I didn't learn my lesson the first time. So, but yeah,
Because you
so
couldn't
that,
have learned your lesson, you wouldn't have had as much background as what you have and can do now. If we didn't have the
Yeah.
shadows, we would be very weak trees without those roots to support us. We need them so that we can be strong enough for the people that we're going to help.
yeah. Yeah. So that was my little adventure today.
That's
In this
wonderful,
week.
though. I'm glad to hear it. It's wonderful when our loved ones surprise us with their own growth.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Oh, I'm going to mention on Stacia's comment, actually, I would like to point out that I had the same problem. I would set a boundary, and then when it was tested, I wouldn't follow through because it hurt me that it was being poorly received. And then I would bend and bend until I didn't have boundaries anymore either. It is something I struggled with, but you have to have your boundaries tested, because the universe has to know, are you serious about it? And are you willing to put the energy into being true to yourself? And so being able to say, I am deserving of being met where my needs are, of expressing yourself clearly, and then having that either received or not. I mean, because you also have to be open to the fact that the person receiving the boundary may go, fuck you. And then you have to say, well, then get out, or whatever the stages are that ends up going. But I bent my boundaries too in the beginning, and it's not uncommon, because when you first start having boundaries, you feel like you're overreaching. When you have never given yourself any type of rights, even, just to keep everyone happy, you would sacrifice whatever because harmony was more important to you. You don't stick to your boundaries the same way. And then when you have them, you feel like suddenly you're being incredibly selfish. You're not being incredibly selfish, but feeling that you are will make you more likely to not stick by the boundaries. And so it's something to look at. Anyone else?
Melissa, go ahead and share.
So I find that I actually kind of go to the opposite side of the spectrum when it
Right.
comes to boundaries. I have put up just like a massive brick wall. Like if there's
Okay.
people I don't really know all that well, like I've been flat out told that people are afraid to approach me. So it's like almost like I just like give off this unapproachable aura.
Right.
Just stay away from me.
And that's you
Whereas like people that
protecting
are close
yourself,
to me
your
talk to
little girl.
me
Yeah,
and confide in me and all of that jazz.
Right.
But like people who don't know me will not approach me, won't talk to me,
right,
nothing.
right.
And
And that's what you're
don't know if
putting
it's a
out.
defense mechanism.
Mhm. It is. And I had a lot of it too, when you're really wounded, and please don't take this as a calling out. It's more of a cautionary tale. But the stage you are in, if you are putting out that I am an electrified fence, do not come near me, is a very wounded little inner you that is easy to damage. And that is the step before people then that are very unhealed can turn into narcissism. And it's because narcissists, by the way, if you hadn't seen any of my other classes, are empaths. They're just empaths that are so wounded that they have this barbed wire fence up, and then they only let in the people that are validating them, because it's the only thing that makes them feel okay about themselves is constant outside validation. I'm not saying that's where you're at, but that step, and I've been there myself, of that warning of the energy you put out, that stay away and I am strong and I will hurt you if you break my boundary. It's not a boundary. It's an electrified fence that's telling people I'm too wounded to deal with you. As you can work on your own healing, that will lower and go away. And actually, one of the upcoming classes I'm doing is on how you replace that wall with your own vulnerability becomes your armor. It's like I talk about my father having sexually molested me in 4th grade. I can talk about it openly. I'm actually glad, as weird as that sounds, because it has allowed me to help other people heal that wouldn't have opened up to someone who has not gone through it myself. But now that is my armor, because someone could say anything to me about it and it doesn't hurt. I've healed the wound and I don't need to protect little me anymore. And so you suddenly find out that you can take down the wall, and just by no longer carrying the guilt and shame we were on things, you can talk about anything to anybody and you're not going to need the wall anymore. And that is an amazing superpower feeling, to no longer have those fears. But I mean, I've been doing about 1.5 years now of, I don't want to say constant shadow work, but it's, I mean, daily I'm at least looking at things. So this isn't, a super quick process. And by all means, keep your walls up until you feel safe to let them down. But you will, as you go through the healing, gradually let them down, especially because you're looking, unlike the people who evolve into narcissism that are too caught up in it and aren't looking to self-improve. They just want to numb themselves with all that external validation. Because if everybody else is telling you how wonderful you are, you're not beating yourself up as much over the things that you aren't externally and consciously. You're still doing it subconsciously. So it still affects you. But the fact that you're looking will help save you from that.
See, I think with I don't really have issues with validation or self-confidence. I think more of it was like, I'm so used to people hurting me that I keep the wall up because I don't trust people.
Well, I agree. And I'm not saying that I'm saying this is the path that leads to the narcissistic stuff, not that you're there yet. I was in the same stage you were before my awakening and my healing, but my next step would have been narcissist, because at that point, you're so empty of your own self-worth that you just want to fill it. You're not there yet. You're still at the holding the boundaries, which aren't even boundaries. Again, it's a wall. A boundary is putting a door in the wall, is telling somebody, if you want to interact with me, this is the criteria where I'm willing to meet you. So yours, I know you were calling them boundaries, but it's actually just a wall to block everything out. Boundaries are how you open a window or a door to communicate with somebody, to let someone in.
Okay.
Anyone else? This is always the weird part of the call.
I joined late, but I just want to say that part that you were just explaining about the wall and needing to add a window, I think that explains a good bit about myself, where I believed I was setting boundaries, but when you just explain that, nope, there's walls. And so I
Right.
need to get myself to where I can allow people in and actually have those windows there so they can say, okay, this is what you will and will not agree
Right.
to.
Have you seen the class I did on boundaries last week? Because if
I-
you have not, I
I
walked
did
through
not.
all of it. Okay, I walked through how to set boundaries and also what the difference is between boundaries that you think are boundaries and where you're just trying to control someone else's action. And the difference is, and to give you the part I think that will help you here, is a boundary can only be for yourself. It is how you will react if someone else makes a choice that affects you. So an example was, there was a couple that we were out with, and he wanted to walk around without his shirt. And she said, you're not allowed to walk around without your shirt. That is not a boundary, because it was trying to control him, his autonomy, his body. A boundary would be, I am not comfortable with you walking around without your shirt. So if you do, I'm not walking around with you. You can make the choices of how you respond in a particular situation. The other thing that's really hard when you first start boundary setting is because, of course, it's the two extremes. It's always, you're going to go one way or another. Is either you will feel incredibly selfish for setting boundaries and you will struggle with having those boundaries, or, and sometimes both, because I've had both, you go too far the other way. If you don't put your dishes away, I'm leaving you. You're really not going to, it's unlikely anyway, that you're going to leave over that. A boundary would be something that is proportionate if they do something that doesn't meet you where you need to be met.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I wanted to share just something that I had years back when I was going through boundary setting after being in a marriage with an alcoholic husband. I had those boundaries where I didn't really want to let a whole lot of people in. I had some close people that I did allow in, still like only little bits and pieces, not everything that was all within me. But I had somebody, I went to a retreat, and one of the things that they had kind of talked about, or that came to me, it wasn't something it was brought to me, it was channeled. Anyway, I got to choose, like, a door and a window seemed like too much for me, like too much freedom, right? People can come and go when they wanted to with a door and a window.
Right.
So I had created a chain link fence that was
Okay.
locked, so I could still see and people could still see me, but they weren't coming all the way in. So it went from the super tall brick
Cinder
building
block,
with
right.
bob wire and like locked up and everything else to chain link. And then I was able to move from that, where I was able to open up the chain link
Right.
gate and allow people in.
Gave you
on-
enough safety, right,
Right,
to
right.
work
But I
through
could
it.
still interact a little bit. And it was really hard for a while, because I feel like also like walking around and I still catch myself in that mode of just that resting bitch face.
Sure.
And so people aren't coming in, and I'm
Right.
I'm in that thinking mode, and I feel that that's what I'm doing, but it's that it gets me back into that space where
Right.
I have to practice the smile. And there is like a statistic that says, like, even if it's just a partial smile, that's a step towards opening up those boundaries as well. So chain link fence, partial smile, and it was work. It was
Right.
freaking work
Yeah,
to
you had to
make sure that
consciously
I'm
work on it.
walking, and I'm not that, like, Ashley will attest to this. Like, there was a time Ashley and I taught together, but I had students that would draw pictures of me with the furrowed brow,
Oh, wow.
like, because I
Right.
had that ugly face on. And inside that broke my heart, because that's not who I am inside, but that's how I presented, and it
Right.
was to guard myself. So just those
I
couple
get
things.
it. I was very, very guarded. I joked around about, 3-foot thick walls, barbed wire fence, gunners. It's part of how I knew that my partner was the most amazing person in the world for me was literally the first time we talked. He walked through like he had a key, opened the door, walked into the walls. And first night we were talking, I'm telling him about the suicide attempts I had as a teenager. Like, he gave me that instant feeling of safe space to open up, the same way I know that has happened with people when they tell me all of these things that, you know, you don't tell strangers usually. But he had had that effect on me, and it is part of what allowed me to eventually open up. If you can let one person in completely, you can start to heal from the inside out and let a lot of that down. Anyone else?
Going once, twice. Anyone else want to share tonight? So we are
I'm-
2 minutes
I'm gonna-
before the, go ahead.
I'm gonna call out Willow. 'Cause she's
You-
private messaging me. And she's like, RBF, haha. She's like, maybe I don't let people in. I'm like, you don't. She has a
I
hard
think
time.
sometimes, at least for me, and I know that it was a boundary, but also like going back to kind of what Stacia was saying, like that there was those negative, you know, we talked, for those of you in the academy, we had Luana on and we talked about vibrations and the level. And so if we're at a low vibration, then we're going to have that anger and that frustration, and that's going to be up here. And we might not feel it on the outside, because I know that I was walking around and inside I was feeling like I was okay, but there was so much going on up here
Right.
that it still was that boundary. The walls were up because I couldn't, I was PTSD, whatever you want to
Right.
label it, there was still shit going on and it was protecting myself. And
Right.
so our higher self knows, and that's where I'll have to find the article and the statistics, but practicing smiling when you're walking around, it will, that changes that vibrational level. It releases all of those things that are going to help you become calmer and bring in more clarity and get
And it
that
helps
vibrational-
rewire your brain
Yes.
to naturally respond then that way, because just like any muscle memory with a video game, you know, the same thing happens with smiling. The more you consciously make yourself do anything, over time, it just becomes your new autopilot. You program yourself to just be more positive, which, you know, who can argue with that?
Why are you calling me out? No, I was just laughing the RBF face because
Mhm.
when Phoenix and I first met, it was Phoenix didn't think I liked her, but I did like her. I just didn't show that I liked her because I'm very guarded, very protected. And
Right.
I mean, I'm sure Linda can attest to this, that I'm very quiet and very shy when you first meet me. But once I feel like
That was
you're-
not my experience first meeting you. No.
Oh. That's because Linda and Phoenix have broke me down
Gotcha.
a little. That I'm
Gotcha.
a little more open and
That's
talkative. but
great.
Before I'm not. I'm just okay. No. But if I'm also reading the energy in the room, and if I don't
Mhm.
like the energy, then I'll be very protected and quiet the whole time. So
I will the same thing, you know, even having worked through the things I am so that I am better able to be more of a hollow bone, be able to bring things through. If the energy in the room is saying, shh, then guess what? I shh, because there may be people there that my particular energy will not, it's not something they're ready to deal with yet, or it will trigger something, and I'll feel that. And that's part of the honing the intuition thing, is you learn to feel. I was recently up in Michigan and meeting a lot of people that are not from the light worker community, you know, like call them muggles if you're a Harry Potter person. And my initial thought when I was going to be meeting all these people was that I'll just, we work at wellness festivals and leave it at that, something that is very non-descriptive. Well, at like 6 different meals over the course of our time up there, I'm telling everybody, doing readings and healing and channeling dimensional beings. I mean, things that, but it's because I could read their energy that it would be okay. Whether it means they embraced it or not is a totally different story, but it wasn't going to be a problem. But there are times where you're in the right situation and your intuition wisely says, bring it back a little, just for now.
Yeah. For the record, I love your energy.
Thank you. I do too.
And I can't think of a time in my life that I ever did walk around without a smile. And I just am very approachable, like even in the darkest times of my life at work or whatever,
Right.
people would call me sunshine because I just walk around and I just
How
shine
much of that,
with
because
love.
I was the same way,
Yeah.
is your trauma response though to things are negative. So I just want to push out the positivity because you're
Mhm.
hoping the reflection is going to show you that positivity back. And
Yeah.
it does to a point.
Yeah.
The more positive you are, the more you get back. But, and I did this myself, a lot of that can hide the deeper sorrows that you have underneath. We use it as a Band-Aid to push it down, but that's still, you'll on the surface will go, oh yeah, I'm over it and I'm fine. Look how
Mhm.
happy I am. I'm fine.
Mhm.
Except your subconscious is still beating your body up with it.
Yeah.
And so when you find yourself with, medical stuff, especially, but even just aches and pains and things, realize a lot of that is because the positivity you're putting out does help. It raises your vibration, but it's not letting you heal if you're not looking then past all the love and light. Love and light's great, but you can't use it as a Band-Aid. You need to actually heal the wounds.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was hurting tremendously, but I was healing
light.
everyone else and not myself.
Yeah.
Eventually, I went to therapy, that's where it began, and then began to heal myself. And
Wonderful.
that's when I realized, yo, this life isn't working out for me. I gotta change it up.
I think all of us hit that point, whether we see it in like 3D, and I mean, so many light workers, we all, not all of us, but I mean, so many of us have had suicide attempts.
Yeah.
And those of us who haven't found some other way to try to more slowly kill ourselves, live recklessly, substances,
Cutting,
whatever.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Not taking care of ourselves.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah.
we get disillusioned until we realize there is more. Like, not only is there more, it's friggin' amazing there's more. I mean, the world that opens up when you start looking for the good and stop looking for the bad stuff. Mr. Rogers, who I consider like such a wonderful example of a healed divine male. So like loving and giving of advice and support. But one of the things he said was, whenever there's a tragedy, whenever something scares you about the world, look for the helpers. Because whenever if you're looking for them, you will suddenly see it's not just, oh no, a mass shooting, which is of course the kind of thing in the news lately that makes all of us stop. Look for the people that ran in to help, the counselors that are then supporting all the children and helping them work through their emotions with it. Look at the community that set up a shelter. Like, look for the people that are bringing the positive into this situation. And when you start to do that actively, the bad things, you will see a lot less of them because you're no longer looking for them. And you start to see a lot more of the positive. And I used to think it was just because I'm noticing it. But it turns out the more you notice it, the more of it there literally is. And
Yeah.
we've seen this, we use the orange car analogy for it, but someone had said, I'm sure I probably told you this one before, so I'll do the short version. But you never notice orange cars on the road. And someone had mentioned, you don't know how many there are until you have one. And so we're like, I don't think we've really seen orange cars. Well, within 2 to 3 days of looking for orange cars, we realized we saw 3 to 4 a day on the road. We now see 10 to 20 an hour on the road if we're like traveling. And there are car lines that we looked at, like Prius. We own one. We looked at Priuses. They did not come in orange. We are seeing them in orange on the road, and enough of them that it can't be a custom color because there's a lot of them. We use the orange car as our example of looking for the good. And when it became our analogy for that, orange cars mean good, we're looking for them and appreciating them. Suddenly there are so many orange cars. And as I said, types of cars we know didn't come in orange suddenly are. It literally, the universe brings you more of the good you're looking for.
Yeah. That's funny because I had an orange car, and right after I bought it, I saw the same car in like neon green, and I was like,
Right.
I want that one. And so,
I get that. That would be sharp.
and so I kept seeing them because I loved them so much.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, it's a sign. And I was like, oh, it's green. So it's love and prosperity. And so then every time I see one, I would go, thank you, angels. And then I test drove one in August, and then I didn't buy it,
Right.
but I was like, I want to buy it. And then, but I told the universe, I said, well, I want a car exactly like that one or better.
Right.
And then in December, I got an email from the guy, and he's like, we still have it, and we lowered the price.
Nice.
So I went in and I bought it for New Year's last year.
That's awesome.
And I was
got
like,
your
I'm
car.
manifested that shit.
No, that's great. I love when stuff like that happens. The one thing I will say in your story that I am working on myself is to not tell the universe exactly what I want and how I want it, because I started to realize I don't want to limit it. The universe will give me much better than what I can ever imagine.
Yeah.
Just if there's things that I feel are important, like the Google directions, that I can say, I want to hit this point there though. Like I want a hot tub. Let's make a place that can have a hot tub.
Yeah.
You know, little things, but I try not to shape it too much, because I know the universe is a much better story writer because it has the big perspective that I don't.
That's why I threw in there or better.
Or better. Yes. Yes. Agreed.
So anyways, I guess we're out of time, aren't we?
Kind of ish. I mean, I'll answer another question if someone has one, but.
Did someone have one? Did Melissa have a question?
I think you're just randomly calling people out, aren't you?
Oh yeah. Well, I
Okay.
saw in the chat there was. She's from Michigan. That's what
yeah.
it says.
Comment. Yep.
Very cool.
All right. So we can go ahead and wrap up. Trina, what is next week's class?
Next week's class is trusting your intuition, I believe.
I think you're right. I should have had that right there in front of me. And that's it. And that will be on the 14th. So we were discussing, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and we can talk about this.
Yep.
So you can go ahead and follow us at Laughing Goddess 888 or the Mystical Woo Academy. And thanks so much for joining us.
And the Mystical Woo Academy.
Did I not say that?
You said or.
Oh, follow both of us. And yes.
There you go.
Stop recording.